All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I'm here to talk about my book, How to Train My Brain, which is a personalized and playful guidebook for children to do with their caregivers. And I want to thank you so much for making the time to come here, especially when we have kids, families. There's so much in life that needs to get done. And in the U.S., kids are going back to school. So I wanted to get this going over the summer, but I think life happens. So thank you for taking the time. My plan is to talk about my inspiration and intentions of the book and share insights of being a family therapist for over 20 years and really how to make the most of this book as it is filled with tips and activities that you can do at home and to deal with everyday stressors and life challenges. There will also be question and answer at the end. That'll be an opportunity, but feel free to type in your questions, and then Louise, my assistant, is going to help me pick out what questions to ask at the end. So a little bit about me. I actually originally was going to be a school teacher. So I love kids. I've always taken care of kids, love being with kids. And so a lot of my early education was learning about child development and how we learn. And then as I went on, getting my bachelor's in psychology, in marriage, and then master's in human development, family studies, and my license in marriage and family therapy. And then I really specialized my training in the parent-child relationship, trauma, neuroscience. I was blessed to work with some amazing leaders in the field, psychiatrists such as Dr. Bruce Perry, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. And I learned about the neurosequential model of therapeutics, EMDR, attachment science, polyvagal, which is by Dr. Stephen Porges. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, as there's a page that references that more in my book. And somatic experiencing, play therapy. And so really I weave in a lot of neuroscience. And actually there's a Einstein quote that says, if you cannot explain it to a 6-year-old, then you don't understand it yourself. So I thought, let me accept that challenge. I really want to teach people neuroscience. And so when I think about my intention of this book, one of them, the primary one, is as a family therapist, I have plenty of families who want to have me work with their kids, work with them, how to support their children. And therapists around the world, everyone has waiting lists. It's hard to get in, and that's also expensive. So I wanted to create an intervention that anyone can do at home. So this really is not meant to be a book that you just sit through in one sitting. This is meant to be integrated into your life. It's meant to give you a language, an understanding for how your mind, your body, your spirit works. And the parent-child relationship is like the ultimate way. Because even though yes, I love working with kids, whenever I have someone come to me, I say, yeah, I'll help your kid. However, I want to meet you. I need to meet you. I want to help teach you what I know so that you can be there and provide this for your children, not just today, for the rest of their lives, because you are their best resource. And one of my favorite quotes is by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who is a trauma specialist and psychiatrist. And he has the quote, "The parent-child connection is the most powerful mental health intervention known to mankind." And my book is meant, that's why I say it's meant to do with caregivers, because it's meant to slow down this busy world and get to know your child, get to meet where your child is. And why it's mostly black and white as you go through it. I'm going to go more through the pages. There's a few coloring just to stick out, but because every child is unique. And and no, kids don't come with instruction manuals. And I actually it always amazes me how everything we buy has a manual. Especially at least I'm one of those people. You refer to it when something goes wrong. You have something to go back to, but we don't have that for our most vulnerable and valuable resource, which is our children. And so that's why I wanted to create this book, so you get to know your unique child. Because yes, there's parenting strategies. Yes, there's tools and techniques that you learn. And if you have 4 kids, you will find, because every kid has a different temperament. They have their own talents. They have their own skill set. They have their own their own energy, their own spirit. And if you try one thing with one child, it won't work with the other one. And it's because we have to meet our child where they are and love them uniquely. And so that's why I created this book, so that you get to stop, pause, and really get to know your child and what helps them feel safe, seen, soothed, and secure. And I use, those are the 4 S's actually from Dr. Dan Siegel's work. He's written many parenting books, and it's about how to create secure attachment. And when you have secure attachment, and I'm going to talk a lot more about the brain, but not all of this is in my book. I'm actually hoping to do a caregiver's notebook that has a little bit more. So this talk gives a little bit more than what's in the book. Yet when we feel safe, seen, soothed, secure consistently, more than 33.3% of the time, we don't have to be perfect. I want to stress that to parents. This is not about perfect. This is about being present and responsive and available, and role model on how to help children. So as long as we can provide that, then a brain can develop in a nice, sequential, healthy fashion, and then we will do our best. This is why I also love teaching people about the human development, because it really does make sense. And a lot of children's behaviors makes sense when you understand the stages that they're going in. And so it really helps to understand that. Which actually brings me back to one of my other intentions. Is there's a big belief out there that if kids are acting out, they're naughty, they're bad, they're doing it on purpose. And I want to educate people that that is just simply not the case. And I guess I'm not saying kids don't do things sometimes, to press our buttons. They absolutely do. But most of the time they're needing connection. And so, what's happening when children are acting out or not able to do the things that they did yesterday, or that you've seen them do it 20 times, but for some reason they can't do it, because in that moment their nervous system, their mind body is overwhelmed. It's either understimulated or overstimulated, and they can't access their smart files, which I use an owl in my book. We'll talk more about it. I use a dog, an owl, and a reptile. I call it Gator in my book. So kids aren't doing it on purpose. They literally actually need someone to come in and help them process, make sense, help them identify, know what's going on, so that they can access their prefrontal cortex, their smart files, their owl brain, so that they can make wise, responsible, healthy decisions. And so they're not trying to get out at you. They're not being bad. They're overwhelmed. And so I often teach that all negative behavior comes from a state of stress, unmet needs, and lack of skill. And the awesome thing is they don't need much. They just need the presence of at least one responsive, warm, safe adult. So I'm going to use a lot of words about safe and love in this conversation. I'm also going to use the word dysregulation and regulated. Now, again, that's not in my book, but it's really important that you understand that, because I naturally talk about it all the time, because a child can only be as regulated as its primary caregiver, which is why I love working with parents, because you can't give something to your kids that you don't have and you've never received. And I got to say, most of us have not had the presence of a warm, responsive, and also because I have my training in education, there's also this idea that you must learn the hard way, and yes, we do. We absolutely learn, but we only learn because it's so hard, because it's a strong emotion. Fear elicits a strong emotion. However, we can also learn in playful, you can evoke positive emotions and learn. And that's what I want to promote more, is that we actually can learn. We learn the best through relationship with someone that we feel safe and that we trust. That's what we all remember our favorite teacher. It's because how they made us feel. And that's what helps us learn to feel when we feel safe. And also repetition. So it's relationship, repetition, and that presence of someone that feels safe, is responsive to our needs, meets us where we're at, and is nurturing. And so that's really the pinnacle of my book. And so I like that's why I say it's, you go through it many times. It's like it has it repeats things on different pages, but it also has reflective questions to say, ask a question that says, well, go back to that page to see where it's at. So those are my really critical intentions, was, again, to create a way to have some sort of family therapy, but at home, to learn the skills that I do every day. And then also to rewrite that reframe that belief that kids are bad when they're acting out, and they don't need they don't need more consequences, because actually that just creates, there are reasonable consequences. Every choice has a consequence, natural. I prefer natural consequences, but they don't need punishment. They don't need that. That's actually going to stress their nervous system even more. Then they can't handle it, and it creates a negative feedback loop. So I often say, get curious, not furious. And when I kind of briefly mention, when I use the word dysregulated, dysregulated means your nervous system is physiologically, or biologically, or emotionally overwhelmed, that you're not able to be calm, and you can't bounce back. You can't access your knowing of what to do and how to handle it. That's dysregulated. Your nervous system is dysregulated. Versus when you're regulated, then it doesn't mean you have to be perfectly calm, but you're at least able to have some awareness and can see thoughts, feelings, separate things out, and respond in appropriate ways to meet the needs. So, as I mentioned my book, the first page is, I just have the introduction, where I talk about how really want to help kids train their brains to keep them safe when they encounter daily stresses, so that they can connect to their mind, body, and heart, and make responsible, wise, and kind choices. And understanding the brain, obviously, is tricky. So I try to do it in a very playful way. And there's a lot of activities. I even have a special note to caregivers here. I did tailor. So in my therapy, I use this book. I also made it so that I can use it in therapy, so that I could teach parents and kids how to understand the model, and we can use it in therapy as well. But so I've used it with 3 to 13-year-olds. I will say 13-year-old is a little, they might roll their eyes at you. However, in my therapy room, because I'm so playful and I create such a safe environment, I have plenty of 13-year-olds who will engage in activities with me. And I even say, for everybody just to read through it once, is the caregiver or the parent, so that you get, because I have brain facts in there. You'll get the model, you'll understand it, reading it from beginning to end. I even had my mom, she read it when she was 80. It took her an hour, and even she was like, wow, I learned a lot of things. There's things I didn't know. So it's really filled with information that but you'll get something out. Like here, I'll just show a picture. Like I try to put little fun brain facts on each of the page. And most of the pages have some sort of reflection question, or a try this now activity, because I believe in experiential. Anyone who's ever worked with me, I have you practice the skills over and over and over, so that you can use them in the moment. So my book is doing that. And it's another reason why, kids don't just sit. It's not about a kid's just sitting. I want them to have a sensory experience, so they're engaging in the book, which is another great way to learn things. So that is, and I'm going to so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go more through the pages. Yet I always love to use my hands to show the hand model, which is kind of Dan Siegel does a version, the upstairs brain, downstairs brain, but I use a lot of my, with all the trainings that I've had, I incorporate a lot more information. So I'm going to use my hands, but before I do that, I'm going to show one page just so that we kind of meet the main characters, and I'll talk about them. So the parts of your brain, I have the owl, which is responsible for executive functioning. The dog, feels and senses. The limbic system, emotional, social center, and gator represents our survival state, basic survival brainstem. So I'm going to show my hands, and I'll talk more about the parts of the on my book and as we go through it. Yet I love to use this model because, I just think it makes so much sense. It's a really clear way. So what we're going to do is, this is your right side, this is your left side, this is your spinal cord, this is your brainstem, which I use as the gator. And when you think about what the gator does, this does everything that keeps us safe in survival. So your heart rate, your breathing, your digestion, temperature, all this that your body's doing, reflexes without any of your awareness, is what the brainstem. And before I go on, I do want to say that clearly the brain is much more complicated than this. This model of the triune brain is just a simple way more for understanding the concepts. Obviously, a lot goes on, so it's not as simple as the book, but I just want to make a point of that. And then I'm going to jump to next. So that's located back here in our brainstem. And then you jump to I'm going to jump to the top part, which I use as an owl for wise. And this is these are executive functionings, our thinking skills, planning, organizing, knowing right from wrong, even empathy. Everything needs to be integrated for empathy, but all that is located up here in our owl brain. And then kind of tucked in the middle, I use the thumb. So the dog is the cover of my book, and the dog is the social emotional part of our brain. And it is on 24/7. And most people have a dog or been around a dog. It is on 24/7 scanning our environment. And it uses all our senses, sight, smell, touch, everything. And the dog, I'll first start with the positive. So imagine when a dog, so I even have this activity in the book where I have the kids, some kids do get on the ground and act like a dog and say, how does your dog act when someone they love comes home, someone they know that is safe and they trust? And usually the dog's happy, and so when we sense, and I want to let you know that when this part that's on 24/7, when it perceives a threat, it's a perceived threat. So it's a perceived, I feel loved, like they're perceiving it. It doesn't even mean that it's real or right. It's just to that child. So if this dog feels safe, then we stay connected and we are able to connect to our smart files. And we can organize, we can plan, we can know right from wrong because we're feeling that. And so it can stay connected. And so if our dog, however, brain is sensing something that's not quite right, feels the perceiving something negative, again, doesn't have to be real. It's just whatever that child is perceiving. And this just takes an eighth of a second. So I even have that fact in my book, a blink of an eye for your dog to pick up a cue of threat. And so what happens is once and again, to a child, like everything is new. We're on, the child's brain is on absorbing so much more than the adult is. And so if they're picking up a threat and they have no one near them, they don't have anyone to make sense of it, process it, identify it, and to hold their hand through it, then their brain is going to continue to set off alarm bells and flood the brain with stress hormones, waiting, trying to soothe the brain down, waiting for someone to come help. And if it doesn't, then we literally flip our lid. And before I even say that, I actually wanted for adults here, since I'm speaking to adults. So I'm saying, not only do they go to the short-term memory to see if you also see if there's any memory of this going well. So that's actually the first thing. It's okay if no one's around, but if there's a short-term memory and we go to our memory banks and we're like, oh, wait, this happened before. Oh, we're good. We're fine. Then we can stay connected. But if they have a memory of oh my gosh, no, this was really scary. That's what's in their short-term memory. Then that's when it's going to fire even more. That's why then they're going to seek for someone to help them, soothe them. And then if we don't have that, then they're going to go down to the brainstem. And this isn't a conscious choice. This is automatic. That child and us as adults, we're going to go to our brainstem. And in the brainstem, I forgot to mention, also holds the first 7 years of your life. It's implicitly downloaded into here. Implicit means you just don't even know. There's no name to it. It just happens to get downloaded into your brainstem. And that's all implicit. And also I tell adults that all the parenting, how people treated you, all your life events, any events that happen even later on in life, that were potentially traumatic or stressful, and you had no place to process it, make sense of it, also gets stuck in your state memory down here. So for adults, that's why we can actually go back and act like a much younger age, because we're going back to some state memory down there. And so again, if we have no one there to help us feel safe, seen, soothed, and secure, the brain's going to keep firing. You're going to flip your lid, cannot connect to your OWL, your smart file, and you will only go automatically down to reptile. And that's where we're going to have fight, flight, or freeze. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as I go through the pages, but and that's why our kids were like, why are they acting like this? Oh my gosh, they're horrible, because they're gator. And I like to use the word gator. I use narrative therapy because it helps externalize from the child. Because if we're just like, why are you doing that? What's the matter at you? That is going to make your child feel even worse, because every child I've worked with, their biggest thing in life is to please you. I know it might not seem like that because they do act out, but because they don't have many skills. But to see their parent upset is terrifying for their nervous system. You feed them, you house them, you give them everything. And so when they see you upset, that is really scary for their nervous system. And they have no choice, but Gator is going to come out to protect them. And ugly things happen. That you lose control. And so I have a lot of images in my book to show what's going on in the body, visuals, because visuals, kids, it helps to have visuals. Briefly, so as I do the model, one of the cheapest, easiest ways to actually get, obviously it's nice to have someone present. But when we don't have anyone present, that's what I'm going to teach the adults and everyone I work with. The cheapest, easiest way to get your owl brain back online to feel and get your nervous system to feel safe is to take deep breaths. So while we're here, as I mentioned, experiential, we can all benefit from taking a conscious deep breath. I'm going to invite you to take a moment and breathe in through your nose and blow out long through your mouth like you're blowing out a birthday cake, candles. And just take a few. I often say you have to take a few of these deep breaths because the first ones will be shallow. You're still going to have those stress hormones. You're going to also have resistance. That's why when I do couples therapy as well, I say, don't ever tell someone, take a deep breath. That does not work. We will naturally resist that. We don't like to be told what to do. That is a natural human thing. And so that's why we invite, or with children say, let's take a deep breath. I notice you're upset. Let's take a deep breath. Or you can even own your feeling and saying, whoa, mommy's overwhelmed. I'm going to take a deep breath. And you role model taking a deep breath. Most of the time, that invites kids to feel curious. They feel safe. They want to explore, and they will oh, what are you doing? Ask a million questions, and so invite and role model taking a deep breath. And just notice as you were taking the deep breaths now, while I was speaking, just notice, and again, sometimes you can have distractions. There's no right or wrong, but just notice how that felt to your nervous system. And that is the cheapest, easiest way to reconnect that top part to our main part. Because you're getting oxygen. We need oxygen in all those cells. So you're literally getting oxygen to all the cells. And then you're sending cues to your nervous system that you are indeed safe and in control, although it does not feel like that. So I give lots of tips. There's even breathing exercises in my book. So now what I'm going to just kind of do is go through some of the pages, not all of them, obviously. So what we have, here we have, I talked about the brain fact. I ask you kids to point it. I'd say color it all over. And actually, I was going to skip it because I was looking at time, but this is this is just the first page where you have the kid, your child, and I use caregiver because I did work for Department of Human Services. I've worked with many kids, foster care system. Not everyone has a present parent. And so I use caregiver because the good news in the research shows every child just needs one adult to make a difference in their life. Just one adult. it's a massive what we can do with just one. So that's why I use caregiver. But here's a page where they could, they make this body shape look like them. And I also do a reminder, you have permission to color all over this book. And I encourage you to let them color all over it. And it's ideal for a child to each have their own, so that and with the digital copy, you can print it out, but so that they can mark all over it and make it their own, put their name down. And this is a spot where I say, put where you have scars. It's amazing. This is where I'll have kids just, they hurt themselves 3 years ago, and you wouldn't be surprised how oh my gosh, and now they get to process that event that happened. I am these bubbles where I say, here, when I say I am, like how to describe themselves. And because the most powerful things we say about ourselves come after I am, and it's really powerful. And I will say, being a family therapist, a lot of kids will say negative things. They say, I'm stupid. I don't know. I'm nothing. I hear that all the time. Breaks my heart. But really, that's what comes up. And I want parents to know, and as a parent, I understand it's hard to hear your child say negative things, but that why I've made this book is because we have to talk about negative things. This is not about making kids happy all the time. This is about providing a safe place so that kids can process and make sense of what's going on in their life, so that they can integrate it into their brain and learn from it and heal from it. And so if your child says, I'm stupid, it's very common for a parent to have their own physiological reaction. It's hard to hear. Notice that. It makes sense. And then we want to rescue them and say, oh, no, you're not. Remember when you did? Oh, you're so smart. That is true. And there will be space for you to do that. But I encourage that while you're sitting with your child, to maybe keep your mouth closed a little bit more on your opinions and allow this to be a safe place. The child just needs an empathetic witness for you, and let them. And so if they do say something that was so negative, I encourage parents to ask open-ended questions like, oh, tell me about that. Oh, when did you feel that? What happened to lead you to feel that? And every time kids share things, they will start talking about these things, and you're going to get what you need to know. And then after they process it, then you could say, oh, well, I do think you're smart, and you can share that. Yeah, that comes after they've been allowed, because if they don't get that space, it's just going to suppress and get down, and then it will explode out in other times. And so this is about just hearing what they think, and don't fill out all the bubbles. Like if they don't finish it, nothing comes. This is about providing ease and no pressure. And that's why if they're like, no, I don't want to do it, don't do it. Go on to a next page. We want to go with where they're at, meet them where it flows. So that is my note there. And so I showed those 2 pages. And so I pretty much to go through each of the brain parts, and I give facts and talk about more in detail in the book. I even have a fun exercise where, name your team. Because again, I like to use narrative therapy that, this encourages the parents to get on board, like come up with a fun name. We want to be whatever, some fun name they come up, the Ravens, I don't know. And so then when they're acting out, instead of, oh, it looks like Gator's coming in. Let's cheer for the Raver. Let's come up with some playful, fun ways. Kids make up chairs, handshakes. Kids love handshakes. It's a great way to connect with our kids. So just so full of ideas. I have to draw out who's in your family, so you get a good picture of who they trust. And I do want to acknowledge, like sometimes the kid may put like a neighbor Bob on their page of who they trust. And again, that's another time where as a parent, you'd be like, why are they picking that? And then ask an open-ended question. Oh, how come you chose Bob? Tell me more. What is it about Bob that makes you feel comfortable? And they may have dogs. They could have a pet rock on there. Who knows? It's fantastic. I love kids, full of imagination. When I going back, so this is my love and fear. I was going to show my hands again, because when that dog is on 24/7, and I talked about when it senses love, then it's automatically going to be able to go connect to Owl. And then so I share more about that. And then if we sense fear, we automatically go to our Gator brain. And so when we are able to connect to owl, then we can be responsible, wise, and kind. And yet when we are fearful and disconnected from owl and go right to gator, we become upset, out of control, and mean. So I do a lot of that. I also have a page for kids, again, for them to draw or write out what scares them. It's fascinating when I do these with kids in therapy. There will be, most of the time, the kids will put something on here. The parents had no idea, and they can draw it or write it. I will go the next page. I really want to go over, I think I mentioned a little bit about the fight, flight, or freeze. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about polyvagal theory here because, as I mentioned, like we have a manual. We're all born with a nervous system. And so when we understand our nervous system, it's an autonomic nervous system. And I kind of like to use the metaphor of a car. You think about, most cars are automatic. And so you have to go through the gear shifts. And so I like to let parents know that, like, when we're connected and in our owl brain, that's called ventral vagal. Don't need to know all that, and that's not in the book. That'll be in later editions. But that's when we know we're on top of the world. We can be wise and kind. We can engage with people. And however, once that dog senses something, we're going to first go to fight or flight. It's called sympathetic. And that's like a gear that's going to go through. And then if we're in fight or flight for too long, we're going to eventually shut down or go down to freeze. And some kids, again, this is a general rule. Some kids might just go right to freeze because sometimes they had a ready memory and they can just ready to be freeze and overwhelmed too much. And it's really important for parents to know that kids they can't just jump up to ventral vagal. Like, you can do all these amazing, wonderful, warm responses, and yet they're not a robot. They're not just going to go. And in fact, it actually takes 20 to 30 minutes. And this is in my book. Most of this is in my book. I just go in a little bit more detail here, but it takes 20 to 30 minutes for our nervous system to get calm and regulated before we can access fully. And actually kids can do it much faster. So kids really could actually bounce back in 10 minutes. But I'm going to give the average for most adults in a nervous system is 20 to 30 minutes. So a lot of these times you're trying the right thing, but they just still need some time or some space. And that's where, I have a page I'm going to show where it's new tricks that you can teach your dog new tricks. And these are ideas of what kids will tick to say, oh, when you do this feels good. And so again, you're going and so I have cooking, art, play. It's usually sensory things, blowing bubbles, petting their animal, sensory, because down here is the sensory part, that sense that this is if you ever hear a lot of good healing therapy work is bottom up work. And actually the brain develops in utero bottom up. Top down is talk therapy. And that's great. I do it. However, a lot of traumatic childhood stuff is somatic. And so we want to get into the body. We want to do things that move. Kids need to move. And so you may be trying one of these strategies with your child and they are resistant, and that's completely normal. And I just want you to breathe through. That's where you go get your own glass of water and do things to calm your nervous system, because it does take time. And the child, you can even say the right words and you can be doing the things the child said they like, yet this is new to them. So they still can perceive what you're doing as a threat because you're doing something new. It's unfamiliar, because threats are anything that are confusing, overwhelming, new. And so they need time to trust. And also kids, you might be say the right words, you're using the words, but if your body energy you're still fuming inside, the kids don't hear you, they feel you. They'll sense your anger, even if you're saying the right words. And another thing that polyvagal has found, that actually when a nervous system is in fight or flight, they actually can't pick up the human voice, the mid-range frequency. And so that the kids literally can't hear you. And that's why we have to get escalated. Yet there are other ways to reach them. And that's why I encourage more somatic stuff. Paying attention to the time. I have the other important thing about this book is that the child, you get to learn what are their cues of when Gator is going to take over, because your body, we are born so intelligent. We have everything we need. Everything is in us. We just need to slow down and pay attention. And so our body is giving us cues. And so it gives us cues by the thoughts. If we're thinking negative thoughts, it gives us cues. So I have a page, go back. I teach about sensations in our bodies. Really, sensations in our body are really the first cues. And so I have a list. This one I chose to do color because I really wanted, this is tricky for people to get. Your body is communicating to you. Your child's behavior is communication. When they're acting out, they are signaling mom, dad, caregiver, whoever, I need help. I am overwhelmed. And so this book gives all these opportunities. There was a freebie. I don't know if you guys saw it. I hope you could access it. This is one of my favorite. I'll make sure there's time for questions. This is one of my favorite activities I do in therapy, and it's where you could do a gingerbread shape, cookie shape if you don't have the handout, but hopefully everyone has a copy of this. And what you do is like whatever a child had an upsetting event, let's say someone called them a bad name, or let's say that someone called them a hurtful name. And then you say, what are you feeling? Mad, sad, whatever it is. And you ask them to pick a color. Just let them choose. And then they color on the body where they're feeling those. And kids really use this. It's amazing what I get to see. And they color all over here and don't limit it. And so I walk through the instructions around here and on the sheet you got. And then I say, what are you thinking? So at that event, when that happened, what were the thoughts that popped into your head? And I have them write them down. And I got to tell you, lots of kids say mean things. And also, like if their parent, I'll have them, if their parent got mad at them, and I'll warn you, they're going to say, I hate, or if it's against their sibling, I hate my brother. They're going to they're going to say these. And I encourage you to give them permission. This is their safe place to get it out. We want to get it out. We want them to express it so that we can problem solve. Yet we got to express it first. And so they'll write out the thoughts that they're thinking, or they can draw the picture, or they can have you do it if they're feeling so stressed. And then here in this call-out, they actually write out or draw with what are the actions they do. How do they behave? They throw something, they yell, they slam their door, and that's where that is. And then once you get all that, then the parent validate that. Wow, he didn't know that. Listen to them. And then we can shift to problem solving. And the good news, we have good cues for when we feel good. So there's a lot of, how we feel when we feel love and trust versus when we feel afraid. And at the end, there's a few more visualizations, activities. I'm not going to go through them all, but when they finish it, then there's a gratitude. It's a gratitude certificate, that to show, and how, and some words of affirmation. There's some extra awesome coloring pages. Shout out to Sonia Reed, who did the illustrations, Kelly Bickerton, who did my editing. And then I also have a resource page filled of all the, I have my own articles, my website and such, and a bunch of my favorite parenting books, and especially on neuroscience. So I'm going to stop if anyone has any questions. And we'll see if anything pops up. And if not, I always have things to talk about. Yes, somatic. Soma, feeling in the body. I know, actually, I just did a podcast, and this brought me up. Really, that is like it's in the body, really. It's the sensations. It's the data that's coming up in the body. And so somatic exercises, so a lot of, and touching, like it's touch. So I do a lot of somatic experiencing, where that's where hugs actually take, I say, if we do hugs is, 20 seconds at least for the oxytocin and the loving bonding hormone. So somatic is body, touch. And so I'll teach, I don't have any of these per se in the book, but, putting one hand on your prefrontal cortex is a grounding exercise. And then you put one hand behind your neck, which is it's providing containment. So here in your prefrontal cortex, when you put your hand here, you're pulling blood. So it's a somatic, it's a body experience, and you're pulling the blood to your owl brain so that you can activate it and get to your smart living files. And then you're holding containment. By holding that brainstem, you're providing that safety and containment. And so that is in a nutshell. Obviously, it can go on, but that's it. So in the body, listening to the sensations. Actually, I will show those images again about the sensations. And that's why feeling and asking what are you noticing in your body is usually when kids are acting, you're like, what are you noticing? You feel fire in your belly. Or I had one, it was so adorable. Someone said, I have butterflies in my tummy. And they were just 6. And I was like, oh, that's so cute. And I hadn't taught them. They knew that. And so listening to them. The handshake with the team. Okay, I will. So I did this one with my daughter. I actually have a YouTube video. I think you could see it of our, and so when she was not upset, when my child was not upset, in a moment when you'd want to do this when they're not upset and say, hey, let's come up with a special handshake. And sometimes in my case, it was elaborate. You could see the YouTube video. Yet it might just be a bump, dumb. You may have seen other videos where teachers, as the kids come into the classroom, they'll have a special handshake for each child because it's like this special connection and you feel it in your body. It feels like, hey, we're special. And so you let your child, you create it together. You want them to lead. And so you'll come up with one. I mean, still you're a parent. If you're too uncomfortable, you can still I'm not sure I can do that because you have body language too. It's okay for a parent to communicate, you know what, I'm not as young as you are and I can't quite do that move. So let's compromise here because you got to listen to your body too. It does have to work for the parent too. And then when they are in a moment of overwhelmed, some kids, I work with a lot of perfectionists. They are feeling so overwhelmed. And then you reach out to do the hand, the shake, whatever it is. And I'm going to be honest, even though this works, kids will be such in dorsal at that point, like shut down, that freeze. They're like, no, I'm not doing that. And so, I would still encourage you to give it away, but I just want you to know that doesn't mean they're going to be receptive to it. But then you might want to pull out another bag of chips because what gets us out of that collapse, that when I was talking about that gear, you have to go, dorsal is at the bottom, which is freeze, fight flight is in the middle, and ventral vagal is at the top. You can't just jump there. So sometimes what gets a kid out of the dorsal, the freeze, is not what they need to get out of fight or flight. So, but that would be an example of that. Let's see. What do you think the world would be like if every child works through it? Great. Love that question. Well, I will be honest. This earthly condition we lived in is hard. This it's certainly not going to rid all evil and bad things. However, what my hope is, it's going to reduce trauma, because trauma is stressful events that occur that are out of our control, unpredictable. So that's still going to happen. We're still going to have stressors that are out of control, unpredictable, and that go on. We're not going to get rid of that. However, what creates trauma, and we know that there's trauma because we're not able to function as well. Our ability to cope, and that's why diagnoses are everywhere. I mean, pretty much. So the hope is that if you read this book, you're going to have a language and a way to connect with your primary caregiver. Because again, we just need one. We just need one to know that we're not alone and to feel safe, to be able to handle all the stressors in life, which will then reduce the likelihood of trauma, which trauma then, like I said, impacts your neurophysiological state. And so you have problems digesting food. I mean, the impact of trauma is huge. Stress, build up stress. Health conditions, digestion, I could go on and on. So that would be my hope, is that eventually we would create a child literate world, like a child development literate world, and a relationship rich world where we will connect more. We'll have more empathy, because also the more that this isn't perfect, you're not going to I always want caregivers to know you're human. You're going to mess up. And the hope is that when you're able to meet this a child at least 33.3% of the time, and for sensitive kids, 50% of the time, it's a little bit higher, but still that's an F. I like to remind people that as long as you can provide that safety and that containment, that 33.3% of the time, then the brain can develop sequentially. So it develops from bottom to top and from right to left, and the brain is developing to age 25. And so if we provide that nutrients, that the safe space, and be an empathetic witness, then the brain actually, we're so resilient, we're so intelligent, we will actually develop in a much more secure, which will lead to a healthier nervous system, which is, I'm going to use Dr. Dan Siegel's acronym of FACES. We will know we have a healthy integrated nervous system when it's flexible, adaptive, coherent, energized, and stable flow. So we would just have more of that in this world. And I think we could use that because a lot of world is fear-based. A lot of what's going on is fear-based. And then when fear happens, we get polarized, and that's where black and white thinking, projecting happen. I mean, a whole host of negative things happen when we're in a fear-based brain, which is our gator brain. So that's my answer there. Any other questions? You can get a copy. Currently, I only have it on my website, positivereframe.org. And the reason why I've looked at Amazon, but I want the spiral bind because I want this child to be able to be flat and color all over it and move around. So I have a shop at my website. And I'm actually, for those who are here, you can get there's a code. I think my administrator will help put some in. There's a promo code that you can get $5 off. I think the promo code's Reframe 5, and it's good for I think it's a month. And that also comes with the digital copy because some kids like it online, and actually because I do online therapy, so I've worked with 3-year-old, 4-year-olds, and other parts, and they can color on a tablet online. And I'm looking to have it in more places and doing more book events. I have it in one bookstore here by me, and then it's going to be coming to New Zealand as well. And let's see, I'm going to be doing more. I'm looking forward to doing more daily talks on my channel here. I also have a newsletter. So if you go to my website, there will be a pop-up to get on my newsletter and you can hear more. On the mailing list, so you know. Yes, I will let you know when it's in New Zealand. The hope is within a month. It was on my to-do list. Got most of it in the way, but yes, I'll send out to let know when it's in New Zealand, the hard copy on the newsletter. Anything else? See if I had any other look at my notes, anything I missed. Sure. I could go on. I'm really passionate about this topic. Let's see. Let's see. Anything else? Any other questions? Oh, the question is, how can a parent convince her child to work with them on this book if the child refuses to do so? Great question. And in the second page of the book, when I said a note to parents, less is more. I use that phrase a lot. So if your child is refusing, validate that, normalize that. Yeah, of course you don't want to do this. I'd much rather go suck a lollipop or go play a video game. Of course you do. Validate that, acknowledge that, and breathe. I'm actually going to be doing my YouTube video on my ABCs. I'm excited to toss that out, but acknowledge, breathe, and then coping thought stands for C. But then you just acknowledge that, and then you lead as the parent. You are the leader. We have to make kids do things. Kids have to do things for health and safety. So as the parent, you still need to lead and set boundaries. And most of the time, I say, because it is a lot, it's uncomfortable to talk about a lot of these things. It can be boring naturally. And so just normalize that. And then you just get curious and you just start doing a page on your own. Just do one page. You answer the questions out loud. you grab a different sheet of paper and write out your own answers. And you just read it out aloud with them around. Because I also encourage kids don't need to be looking at you. They don't need to be sitting with their hands crossed and yeah. That does not mean they're learning. I recommend having kids have their favorite stuffy, have something to play with in their hands, have them jump rope, have them moving their bodies while they're listening. And you still can set some boundaries and say, hey, I need you at least in the room while I read this. Let's just do 10 minutes. We'll set the timer, 5 minutes. The younger the kid, the smaller, less is more. And then you just start doing it. And when we lead with confidence, kids really do follow. They really do. Yet when they don't, validate that, acknowledge that, and then back off and then try again. Because on average, it takes 21 times to learn a new skill before it's secure. So you just kind of keep planting seeds, keep going, back, in and out, in and out. Any other questions? And it's completely normal for kids to resist this. So normal. Awesome. Looks good. Let's look through my notes, see if there's anything else I missed. I'm just so happy. I mean, anyone who's known me for a while, took me a long time to finally get this together, and I'm hoping to bring it into schools as well. Because I think this would be, as I've helped many kids who are in schools, because a lot of kids, I have found like schools are awesome. Obviously, they're useful and helpful. But for kids who are more sensitive, have trauma histories, or their brain neurodiversity, they tend to get more in trouble at school. So that's why I also want to bring this more into schools, so that there's a language, there's a way to figure out, so the kid's not kind of like, I'm bad, it's really hard. So that's also my hope, to be doing more trainings as well for teachers and parents. I really appreciate everyone hanging out with me today. And this will be recorded, so you can watch it on my channel. You can share the link with people. Please do share. All right, looks like no other questions. Then I'm going to wrap up, and you guys all take wonderful care of yourselves and take care of you, because you have vital needs, and be kind to yourself when you're not acting your best self. It's because you have stress, you have unmet needs, and there could potentially still some skills you have to learn. We're all human. It's really difficult. So take care of yourselves.